I'm finally backing out of college, and my goal with making this video is to debunk the notion that Battle Oracle is useless, because that's a thing that I see floating around, where people say it is significantly weaker than the pre-remaster version of Battle Oracle, which I think is just blatantly incorrect, and I will go over why in this video. But before I even go into anything mechanical, I first need to start with, why would you ever pick Oracle over something like Cleric? Because if we're talking about, oh, well, there's slots and whatever, the main distinction that puts Oracle above other casters is that it has curse-bound activities, as well as absurdly high base stats in terms of HP and slot quantity, but the main special ability it has are these curse-bound actions. Now, these actions, for a caster, are incredibly efficient. And the goal of this Battle Oracle, all of these builds, their common tie is they use two of these activities, one of which boosts your initiatives and makes it so you go first more often. Another one, which lets you get guaranteed knowledge of the enemy's weakest save, so you can then abuse that with the spells that you decide to cast, and also gives you a bonus to your next either attack roll or skill check from an attack action, such as trips or grapples. So that is fundamentally the idea with Oracle. These do come with a drawback, and that drawback is the Curse Pound. And for Battle Oracle, that gives you a weakness to damage from spells at Curse Pound 1, and a -1 to saves against spells at Curse Pound 2. This is not magical abilities and spells, just spells. So I want you to think, and just go into your head, when was the last time your GM used an enemy that cast a spell that did damage to you? For most people, that number is going to be rather small, unless I'm your GM, because, well, when I'm making a bunch of creatures for a Starfinder game, you run out of ideas to make ranged attackers interesting, so you end up making a lot more mages. And that's just kind of how things go because of, yeah. But generally, in a normal campaign, it is not that often you see a whole bunch of just castery enemies. And this bonus to damage from enemy spells really stops mattering after you have like 30 HP, because you're only going to get one spell cast on you per turn. Because swarms of spellcasting enemies are super uncommon. And the reason for that is, as a GM, good luck tracking that many different spells. So from a GM sanity perspective, this build does not really have a weakness from its curse. Where if you compare it to something like Bones Oracle, there are quite a few complexity light monsters that may deal damage of the void variety. And if you have a bunch of creatures that can do void damage, you then have a bunch of things provoking that weakness. And I know that one of the comments people are going to make is that, but Boracle has a really bad focus spell. And they are correct. Their focus spell, and all that it does, is it gives you a bonus, no, not even a bonus. It gives you baseline usable proficiency in martial weapons, as long as you continue hitting strikes, not just making strikes, hitting the strikes as a spellcaster. And it costs actions to set up, when our entire goal is to just be as front-loaded powerful as possible. So yeah, their focus spell is pretty ass. If you want to have a really strong focus spell from Oracle itself, you should be looking at the Bones Oracle. But I have other ways that we're going to get focus spells, so that really isn't that much of a downside. And also, if you're going Bones Oracle, you are required to pick up a little bit of a healing ability instead of some of the front-loaded stuff I'm mentioning here. So that pushes you to being more of like, ooh, I do one thing that's front-load, and then I have this backup healing option to stabilize somebody if we just need a quick stabilization. Which I think is like less strong than just pumping all your power out into turn 1. And if somebody goes down, you have additional slots and heal. So yeah, I do think that Battle Oracle does have a legitimate niche in this caster that can front load a bunch of abilities and really utilize its spot early initiative. And I know that this is also going to be a comment, And people are going to say, but I don't understand why having power early in a fight matters compared to power late in a fight. It's power is power is power, right? Well, no. Having high power early in a fight means you can use that advantage to then immediately start taking enemies out of initiative, immediately start putting them into a worse spot, and forcing them to be less efficient. And if you're making the enemies be less efficient in those early turns, suddenly you, as a healer, no longer need to heal, and you can continue applying offensive pressure and snowball wins so that you're not spending resources in easier fights. And in harder fights, you build an advantage early so that your healing can actually carry you to a win. That is the goal of being powerful early. So having early power is deceptively strong, where having power later in a fight is kind of whatever, because the fight should ideally be kind of over by then, by people doing stuff that is more front-loaded. In previous videos, I said this is the dichotomy between a fast strategy that just tries to win quickly and a slow strategy, which tries to build up into an inevitable win. This definitely leans into the fast strategies, but with your spell prep and your spell selection, you are ready to lock in and play a slower fight if you need to. So you can do both very efficiently. And that is going to be true of all of the 3 different Boracle builds we will see. I also do 3 builds that are fighter splashing Battle Oracle, so you have an option if you do want to make something that is more of a weapon user. Hey, it's me, but editing the video, and the lighting's different because I didn't turn on the lamp before recording. But I wanted to pop in to just quickly say that the remaster version is not weaker than the pre-master version. If you do the math for what your AC is when you're not making strikes, because, well, you might not be able to make those strikes every turn, you end up seeing that even if you're running around in light armor with pretty low dexterity, your AC is still pretty equivalent to what the old Battle Oracle had in their medium armors, or their heavy armors even. So this just means that it's easier for you to splash into champion archetype. And the correct thing to do on previous Battle Oracle was also go into champion archetype. It's just now it's like a bigger gap, which design-wise and character variety-wise, not a great thing for the game. But if we're talking about stronger versus weaker, yeah, no, the new one is not weaker. Old Battle Oracle had a lot of issues in its curse, and it still had like a lot of the weaker things having to do with its weapon proficiencies. So this is not a downgrade compared to pre-master. I do not know where that idea started, but it's incorrect from a power level perspective. You can say flavor-wise it is disappointing, and that's fine. That's totally fair, and I can see where you're coming from. But I like current Battle Oracle as a front-loaded power character that then can do this weapon user thing with just like a few feats. In my calculations, I have done some math. And this is just a damage per round calculator, so this is going to show the average expected damage of a Battle Oracle. And the idea of this build is you're going to have a D12 weapon, you're going to swing it, and then you're going to use the folk spell Cry of Destruction. And you can see this is compared to like a martial with no rage, no damage bumps, but still martial accuracy and like all the normal martial damage things. You're getting like about that much damage, even if you're whiffing on your first strike and you're just doing a Cry of Destruction, which does D8s instead of D12s if you whiff that first strike. So you're doing pretty well for yourself, damage-wise, even despite being a caster. And this is sustained damage. You still have all your spells for utility, and if we find ways to make it so you're survivable, suddenly we're looking at a character that can do near martial consistent damage, and still have caster utility in the back. So let's discuss that weapon user and how you build that character. And so here is the path builder for that build. And you may notice that there are green numbers here. That is because I have automatic bonus progression turned on. And what that means is that everything basically automatically scales the runes, so I can change the level of the character. And it's basically what your equipment will look like at any given level, so you can just kind of look through it. I built this up to level 10, just because, like, I think that's enough for you to get a strong idea of the build, and if you want to bring it up to level 11, like, just, you know, think, and then do it. I think that after you start getting the high levels, you're starting to go into more what is good for my campaign, what is good for what GMs are throwing against me, and so I'm less equipped to give generalized advice for that. In addition, most games start in the low levels or at level 11, so like this gives you a strong baseline even if you're starting an AP that starts at level 11, because you just pick one more skill increase, one more general feat, and you're basically good to go. So, let's start with what I think the most important part of this build is, and it's nothing on this side. It is champion dedication. And so for all of the battle oracles that I'm going to be discussing here, we are going to be taking champion dedication. For those of you familiar with this game, this should not be that surprising for you. I personally value picking a lot of common options when I'm making a build guide that is meant for general use, because that way you are avoiding GMs banning things due to commons, so you will not see me talk about Exemplar Archetype very much when I'm making my general guides, because there are a lot of restrictions on Exemplar and it can be hard to play it in an actual game, and I want these guides to be generally useful. But in this scenario, I think champion dedication is the strongest archetype for a battle oracle, period. And the reason for that is if we look at what we are doing with battle oracle, we are looking to sit in melee, swing a sword. Sure, but we still have caster HP, and we only have light armor training, so we're going to be split our attention between strength, dex, and charisma unless we find a way to get armor. We could do that with a general feat, but we're going to burn that general feat on weapon proficiency, because again, our focus spell is ass, and we don't want to be relying on that in order to actually swing our weapon. I'm picking a bastard sword because it lets you two-hand for D12, go into one hand so you can still do the grapple maneuvers. It's not a main game plan, but it's an option for if we need it. And I value having that option more than most other two-handed trait weapon with +1 trait. And we don't really need the reach from a polearm because we aren't planning to do any reactive strike shenanigans, which is really where reach starts to shine. So, we're going to go champion dedication because it's going to fill our armor. It's going to give us more HP, and it's going to give us something to do with our reaction. And normally, those are all three major weaknesses of oracles. So, being able to take one archetype that fixes all of our major issues, it's a no-brainer, we take it. And also, because of how oracular curses work, your curse bound, when it ticks up, you're limited at 2, so you can only ever use 2 curse bound feats in a fight, and we are planning to burn both of them on turn 1 or before turn 1. So we are not going to get much use out of actual oracle feats, so we are going to want to archetype very strongly. And so it is a no-brainer to take champion archetype, and that is going to be like a main thrust of the build, is everything that I'm talking about will have champion. Let's back it all the way up to level 1. You have the general idea of what we're doing. Defensively, we're not trained the army yet, so this number AC is going to be a little bit different. Generally, you can have an AC of like 16 if you start with studded leather and stuff, and it's like, you'll have fine, not good, but fine AC. But level 1 only lasts for 1 level, and so, while I don't like having something that's weaker at level 1, this is like what I do. And so we are playing a human, because we want to have access to weapon proficiency and an extra class feat at level 1, and that means we are playing human. For background, you can pick any background that boosts either strength or charisma. You don't get any of the important skill feats from background, like you can't get Titan Wrestler. You can't get something like Bon Mo. You can't get any of the like very nice combat relevant feats. The closest you can get is Intimidating Glare, but Intimidating Glare gets a lot worse after you pick up Intimidating Prowess, which this build plans to do at level 4. So, because we can't really retrain backgrounds in Rules as Written, and I'm building this for pure Rules as Written, I'm going with Tax Collector, because I think it's really funny to say my character was a tax collector. That is my entire argument. If you want to pick a different background, go for it. I do not think any of these skill feats here are particularly relevant. You can use it to tech the campaign for specific lore. Whatever you want to do, it's not that relevant. In terms of abilities at level 1, we're maxing out strength and charisma, putting the rest in con and dex, because you want to live and you want to hit and you want to cast spells. So we do it like this. That is the entire argument I am making. For skills, I highly recommend getting athletics because we get that maneuver offhand potential, as well as getting all the charisma skills except performance, because performance is not great. So that way you can act as a face for the party. Going into level 2, I say get Bon Mot. With this build, we are going to be maxing out the intimidation and diplomacy more than most things. So Bon Mot will be actually pretty valuable. And because of Whispers of Weakness, we will be able to identify when Will is the weakest save, so we can then target it with Bon Mot, lower it even further, and then start beating the hell out of them with spells. Because we are still a full caster at the end of the day, and you know, if we can set up our own wombo combos from will save spells, that's great. I'm going to talk about spells a little bit later. For this in Champion, I'm going to go with Justice Cause, and the reason for that is we have a D12 weapon. I want to swing my D12 weapon as often as possible. Other options include Redemption and Grandeur, which are basically defensive reactions that debuff the enemy. You can also go with Liberator. Basically, any of the champion reactions that protect an ally are all about equally good, and you can go with whatever one fits the character the best. For this character, the thematic concept is that we are going in there with a sword and we're trying to hit people, so I'm going with the champion that makes it best at hitting people. I do not think that is going to be much of, like, a debate, so I'm going to just lock it in. And then I buff Intimidation here at level 3, reason being that I think Intimidation is more valuable in combat, and this character in my head is kind of scary. So Intimidation, if you want to lean to more of a face and like a friendly side angle, you can go into Diplomacy. Those are going to be the two maxed out stats. Fuck whichever one first you want. I don't. Level 3, take Fleet. Helps you move speed, helps you get in, helps you get out. It's Fleet. It's good. Like, it's Fleet. At level 4, we go Basic Devotion for Deity Domain, where we get Destruction, which thus gives us the focus spell of Cry of Destruction. Ending me here, hey, your deity choice for champion actually will matter, because you will want to have access to the Cry of Destruction focus spell, which means as a champion, you will need some deity with the Destruction domain. There are quite a few of them. If you want one of them that is classically good, I recommend Regalthea, which lets us just do 15-foot cone, basic save, to deal spell rank D8, or spell rank D12s if we've already done damage to the enemy this turn with a strike or spell. And we are planning to strike, so we can go strike, Cry of Destruction on hit, and if we miss, we can cast, you know, one of our other spells that we have, because we have a good amount of options. And fundamentally, this job here that this is serving is our, I just want to do consistent big damage, because we have a lot of focus points. We're never going to cast Weapon Trance. We get, at level 4, 2 uses of Cry of Destruction, which gives us pretty good sustained damage, as we saw over here. It is comparable to, like, Ranger not using their edge, which is, like, still fine. It's comparable to, like, D12 generic martial range of damage. Again, not the best damage, but it is very respectable for a character that happens to be carrying around 4 spell slots of power and is still hard to take down because we have the champion armor and 8 base HP. So we're, like, pretty well protected while doing this very aggressive thing. Grab Intimidating Prowess because it makes Demoralize better. Moving on. A Clever Improviser because it makes that we're never useless. For the ability boost at this level. Boost Strength and Charisma because those are our, like, main stats. And then boost Con and Wiz because they are saving throws. And I personally think that dex saves and reflex saves in general are overvalued, because you're just stopping damage and you can always heal damage. Will save abilities can very, very much screw you over super hard, and con is related to your HP. And we are planning to be a melee-oriented caster, so going in with this +1 con is already very greedy, so that's my recommendation. At level 6, Champion Reaction, because that lets us swing our D12 sword more. Easy enough. Skill feat, here it starts becoming personal preference of you can just kind of pick whatever you want. I'm not going to go into skill feats too much at this point. I'm just going to list. Pick your favorite of like the skills you're maxing, just because that's at the point where you're starting to make decisions based on your character instead of like a build. And so I don't want you to think that these skill feats from this point onward are super special. I'm picking Eyes of the City because I think it would be cool to have this character be able to have contacts anywhere they go. I just think it's neat. Level 7, get Toughness to again help with that survivability. Level 8, Champion Resiliency to get 1, 2, 3, 4 times 3 for another 12 HP, which, you know, is helpful. Every little bit of HP we can get matters. And again, we do not really care about any of the Oracle class feats. There is an argument for steady spellcasting because we are planning to be in melee, and that means reactive strikes really screw us. But my argument is, before running into melee, you always have the option of casting Roaring Applause. So just do that and turn off the reaction for everybody. That's my opinion at least. So I think that generic more HP is probably better than having a % chance to not lose your spell if you're already getting crit. Because my advice simply, don't get crit. And then if you do get crit, make sure you survive. Because I think surviving is more important than if you would survive anyway, you'd get off the spell. Personal preference thing, but I do think that having this more HP here is just better. At level 9, I suggest going to multi-talented and grabbing Psychic. And the thing that we are grabbing from Psychic is Unbound Step. And so with Unbound Step, we get Warp Step. And Warp Step will let us use a single action and a focus point to stride double our move speed plus 20. Did I say stride? Oops, I meant teleport. Yeah, it's one of the best gap closers in the entire game. And we can just get it from an Ancestry feat. A note is, if you want to go into a secondary archetype that isn't Psychic, you can do it at this level 8 mark, and it doesn't make you locked out of multi-talented. So that is a note if you want to, like, splash into Dandy or something else that's a little bit more RP focused. You can do that at this level 8 slot. Then at level 10, I'm going to pick up Devout Blessing because it gives us the more HP from the Champion Resiliency from before. It lets us get even more move speed. Lets us help allies not take damage from enemy reactions. I can go Evangelize because I think it's really funny to monologue at people in the middle of a fight. It's another thing that can target will if they understand you. So you can go Bonmo Evangelize. And I think that's a really funny 1-2 punch. And I do like making stuff for the bit. Okay, now I think it is time to go into actual spells. I'm only going to go over the spell list once because it doesn't really change that thoroughly between Oracle builds. This is just kind of what I set up as like a generic, very strong divine castery list for a spontaneous caster. Feel free to modify this however you want. So in terms of offensive cantrips, I have Divine Lance, because if you are fighting fiends, this lets you provoke weaknesses. If somebody's getting possessed, it's just like nice. Lets you avoid any physical resistances that things might have. You can, again, swap this out for something else if you don't like it. Needle darts, you can carry out a bunch of like chunks of cold iron, other stuff to proc weaknesses. It also has physical damage, so you don't get walled by constructs, so you can still attack them from range. Haunting Hymn, because it is a saving throw cantrip for if we do run out of the ability to cast Cry Destruction, we still have something. It's not great, but it's something. This, again, can be swapped out for all kinds of stuff. And then for our utility cantrips, I'm picking up Detect Magic and Light. We also have Shield granted to us for free because we're awesome. And so this is a pretty solid list of cantrips. There's nothing really here to discuss that thoroughly. It's just kind of like these are good cantrips. So feel free to swap things out. Make sure you have at least one attack damage cantrip. I'd recommend that cantrip to be Needle Darts, because very, very few things in the game will be flat out immune to piercing, where I can tell you constructs will be flat out immune to Divine Lance. But if you do not have access to Rage of Elements for some reason, like you're playing Pathfinder Society and you do not have that book, you can get away with Divine Lance because the most that we're going to do for our damage is, of course, weapon striking. You're just going to need to note that you are now going to get walled by constructs, but you're going to have better time against werewolves. So, whatever. In terms of actual spells, at level 1, I recommend the selection of Runic Weapon, because making something able to be +1 striking tends to make enemies disappear really fast. You can self-buff with your D12 weapon, but it's usually better to slap this on a fighter who's going immediately after you in initiative, especially as you're frequently going first. You can then use the Oracular Warning to have everybody go a bit earlier initiative, so you can better set up Runic Weapon on this guy, have him immediately kill somebody. We end the fight very, very quickly. So Runic Weapon kind of solves early game if you're able to win initiatives, and Oracular Warning is a way of helping you win initiatives. So Runic Weapon is just disgusting. Later on, once everybody already has striking weapons, you can swap this out and get something like Fear if you want something that's like generically always a little bit useful. Helpful Steps, if your GM does not ban it, is absurd. But you can kind of use this as a utility slot that you can use for RP, so you can have like a Create Water, because that could be really interesting in like out of combat scenarios. You can style on people with Restyle or Quick Sort or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Fundamentally, the important spell here is Heal, because we have additional slots, which means we always have access to heal, basically at all times. I guess I should shout out Infuse Vitality as well. I saw it in here. But just being able to give everybody's weapons plus 1d4 vitality damage means that you're able to provoke extra weaknesses against zombies, which can be relevant, campaign dependent, but can be relevant. Yeah, Heal, disgusting. Heal's great. We have extra slots. We have a bunch of ways to use Heal because our main game plan does not involve our spell slots, so we will always have spell slots to heal. Generally, we will value spells that are more specific but powerful in that situation more, because our main game plan is spell agnostic. Our main game plan is we just pretend to be a marshal. So we basically can go for mono weird utility spells and basically always be having the right thing for every situation all of the time forever, which is what this list is built to do. So, going into the rest of the first rank spells, because I didn't even finish talking about them. We have Bless and Benediction because they are area of effect abilities that you can set up once, last for the whole fight. If you have an off turn where, let's say, you whiff a strike and you don't really want to Cry of Destruction into maybe a fort high enemy, you can then throw up a Benediction or a Bless and basically give out bonuses that a Bard would. You maybe don't need both, but like, whatever. If you're playing a Starfinder game, there's actually an argument for taking Bane and Malediction, because we are a melee creature, so we are likely to be standing next to enemies rather than allies, because ranged focus meta. So that is the argument for taking those spells instead of Bless and Benediction. Although in most scenarios, your party is also going to be pretty melee oriented. And so here at second rank, we are Revealing Light, as this is then something you say, hey GM, invisible creatures now don't matter to me, which is very nice. And also dazzles enemies, which means this increases the tankiness of your side, which then lets you have more time to do whatever you want, push damage, whatever. Dispel Magic, because sometimes magical effects can be really annoying, and I think somebody should have Dispel Magic on average. May as well be the guy with a bunch of extra slots who has no idea where he's going to put them. Sudden Blight, because it's area damage. Blood Vendetta, because another way for us to burn our reaction. And it triggers when they hit us, that way we can like punish them for hitting us, while we have a champion reaction punishing them for hitting our allies. I decided to signature Dispel Magic, because Sudden Blight isn't that useful as soon as we get Divine Wrath at 4th rank. But you can absolutely signature spell Sudden Blight and then retrain the signature into Dispel Magic after it stops being as useful. At 3rd rank, Roaring Applause to turn off reactions and slow enemies. Dream Message because it's utility and can help you stay in contact with NPCs. Calm, because in terms of the Divine List, this is a will targeting spell that if the incapacitation does not matter, this may as well read win target fight if they fail a save. For a max rank slot, that's pretty damn good. It's really rare in Pathfinder you get something like that. And due to Whisper's weakness, we can scout out with guarantee, hey, is will their weakest save? On turn 1, to then be able to launch a disgusting debuff. And we also have things like Bond Mode to further debuff that. So we can go Bond Mode, Demoralize, bam. We have power. Heroism just because it's a nice buff spell. Calm is being signatured, so that way the in-cap effect, we can keep on upcasting it and keep it being useful as our usual will targeting spell. If the enemy's on our level, if the enemy's not on our level and will's the weakest, we then do Roaring Applause. If it is something that isn't will that is the weakest, we then have other people target that, or we pull off the offhand off the weapon, start doing grapples and trips. Generally, that's the game plan. 4th rank, we have Divine Wrath. This is the big area damage spell. Doesn't hit allies, so even if the front line's very messy and everything's like deathballing, you can Divine Wrath, plant it on your feet, and only hit enemies. Very nice. Fly. Self-explanatory of why you would want Fly. It's like, if you need to explore somewhere, Fly is great. I don't want to explain that further. Translate at 4th rank, because again, sometimes you just pick stuff for the utility factor. And this lets you say, oh, now all 10 of us can understand each other, let's go negotiate. And then you have all the face character abilities. And then for the final one, another silver bullet spell of Blazing Armory. In this case, it is, hey, do the enemies have a fire weakness? What if all of us in the party suddenly had the ability to deal fire damage with our strikes? Yeah, this may as well read Hydra Bane 2, while Roaring Applause is Hydra Bane 1 because you turn off all of its reactive strikes. This build in its baseline activities is so strong, I can start prepping spells to deal with individual enemies I know are going to be problematic for us. And Hydras aren't very high up on my problematic creature list. So we are now ready for a random encounter Hydra, which very few builds can say. The signature spell is Divine Wrath because it's an area damage spell that heightens. Self-explanatory. In 5th rank, I say Breath of Life because this is letting you have counterplay for an ally straight up dying, and it doesn't cost actions because we're likely going to want to be striking. Mere Malefactors, another will save ability that just does really good damage, and is our signature spell because it heightens really good damage. Wall of Flesh, because wall spells are very disgusting. Even a bad wall spell is still a wall spell. And then Sending, to again keep in contact with NPCs. If we have spell slots left at the end of the day, shoot off a few Sendings, and just keep in contact with everybody at all times. And we have all this utility, and reminder, we have heal signature, so we're also a healer during all this, while having the near martial damage, while having everything else. And this is, in my opinion, not the strongest way to play a Battle Oracle. Didn't expect that one, now did you? Yeah, that's right, because we're going to talk about grapplers now. So if I just open my Boracle Grappler. Spell list, very similar. I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's very, very similar. I think it's actually literally the same, just because, like, again, couldn't be bothered to think of anything else. And the opening things are very similar, except now we're getting fleet earlier instead of weapon proficiency, because we're not planning to use a weapon, we're planning to just grab them. And we're not planning to make strikes or do damage. So as such, now we're going with one of the non-justice causes that can go holy and protect allies. I'm picking Grander just because I think it's very consistent. I've had a lot of encounters with enemies that use dexterity to attack, so that has soured me on Redemption quite a lot recently. But Redemption is still a very strong choice if you want to do it. Liberation is also very good if your standard foes tend to not have reach very much, because Liberation gives you that free step. A lot of the feats here will look very, very similar. We're picking up Titan Wrestler, making sure to do that. And we're going to be going Athletics and then either Intimidation or Diplomacy as the skills we are maxing. You can also split between Intimidation and Diplomacy. Depends on what kind of mental stat you want to focus on. But we are trying to hard max Athletics with the simple idea of we are a grappler who still has all these abilities. And now we are trying to win initiative. We are using the Whisper of Weakness to figure out what their lowest save is, if it is either Fort or Reflex. Now, because like the Divine List doesn't have great things to do single target Fort targeting or single target Reflex targeting, we now have the Grappler part of it, making it so that those are very easy to target and get, a bonus for doing so. And then if we find, oh wait, Will is the strongest save for them, or the weakest save for them rather. We then have all the Will save spells I mentioned earlier in the previous section, and that is fundamentally the idea. And these grapples do work very well, despite our strength being 1 lower than an optimized Marshal could get if they're maxing strength. And we have a lot of sources of a +2 bonus, because now instead of going for Destruction, because we're not really planning to do damage for single action activities, we're going Might, which gives us access to Athletic Rush, which lets us move while using it, and then gives us a bonus to athletics checks for the rest of the round. It's the rest of the round. So that means if we grapple somebody with Athletic Rush, that +2 to athletics checks is boosting the DC to escape, so it's very hard for enemies to escape this. And if our grapple plan for some reason does not work, oh no, we do our fallback. I'm a 4-slot caster with a well thought out spell list. You're gonna be fine. And you have Champion to fix all your tankiness issues. Here I'm going Dandy just because I think it's interesting roleplay wise. And that's it. That's like what I think the strongest version is. And if you want to see how to do this in like a free archetype, I can go ahead and open up the Boracle free archetype grabber, which I didn't even bother filling out the spells for because it's gonna be it's the same. Okay, it's the same as the other two. Just look at the spells from the other two. All right. Okay. But anyway, what does free archetype change? Not much. We just kind of get more champion stuff. Like at level 2 here, we can get domain acumen, so we can get might or destruction from Oracle rather than relying on champion. At level 4, we can get both champion resiliency and another champion feat like devout magic. And for this, I would recommend Shields of the Spirit if you're doing the grappler, just because being able to apply spirit damage is really good as just like, this is now my damage source type deal. And for Lay on Hands, it's normally great at being an out of combat healing source. If you need it, go ahead and pick it. But we do have a better source of emergency healing if somebody's like looking weak. And it's called, we have 4 spell slots per rank and heal, and we don't normally plan on burning slots. So heals become very common and easy to access, especially starting in the mid levels like 4 or 5. So I don't think you need Lay on Hands. So Shields of the Spirit lets you cheat actions to raise the shield and lets you do some damage over time. And this gets you up to 3 focus points really quickly, gets you that bonus HP really quickly. We of course get Brilliant Flash or whatever the champion reaction boosting one with champion reaction, which again boosts our HP even further. With how many champion feats we're taking, we are effectively an 11 HP class chassis instead of an 8 HP class chassis. So you will have like the HP that compares to like fighters and things, with an AC that compares to fighters and things, while having damage that compares to marshals if you're doing the damage route, or grapples that are so useful you start to outcompete bards as utility characters. But trust me guys, Battle Oracle is weak. Anyway. I still recommend getting Psych Dedication even though we don't get an extra focus point from it, just because Warp Step lets us cheat space so easily. And also with Free Archetype, it does free up more of our feats to then be able to take like some more of the Oracle feats that then get stronger the higher our Cursebound is, because we get to high Cursebound very quickly, and we do not care about playing at a high Cursebound in most fights. Cursebound 2 is still very, very good into casters. Like, you're still fine. You're a grappler or a warrior character into a caster. and it's kind of worth still burning those two very early on before you know what they're doing. But if they aren't a caster, well, suddenly the Dead Walk looks very, very good. Because now you're able to summon a whole bunch of guys that are going to flank with people, do damage, and it's just like a way for you to push power. Yeah, I like the Dead Walk. It's very cool, very good if you're getting this Curse-bound 3 where you're summoning 3 guys are dealing damage. And you're going to get access to Curse-bound 3 literally the next level. So it's not like a long wait before you're using it. But yeah, you're fundamentally just taking more champion feats, and that's it. That's really the only difference. And so this ends the Battle Oracle section of the Battle Oracle guide. Which means it's now for the fighter section, because it wouldn't be a Pathfinder optimization guide without glazing the fighter. Hey, editing me coming in here. Just wanted to say that the reason that you'd play the Oracle Fighter hybrid in this manner is that you get the fighter action and the fighter consistent damage, but then you also have the Oracle abilities to cheat in initiative and to get bonus accuracy for a strike, as well as scouting out a weakness, so that way your casters in the party can then exploit that weakness, while you still didn't lose much because you're still getting that bonus accuracy, to then be able to use a 2-action attack, such as a vicious swing or get off a grapple if you're going to play the grapply fighter type route. So that's the fundamental idea of the next few builds that you're going to see. So just figured that I should put that in here because it was kind of confusing without this section. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the video. And so for this build, I am actually breaking my no uncommon or rare rule because I wanted to use Lizard Folk because all the good unarmed strike ancestries are uncommon. Now, you can absolutely get away with playing like a grapple fighter using Orc Tusk, but D6 non-agile being your main attacking maneuver is rough, so I would not recommend it. Yeah, fundamentally, the idea for this fighter is you just do the Lizard Folk thing, you the Eruxi armament, you get access to the claws, is a big deal to have D6 agile and D8 non-agile, because we are still planning to make strikes with things like Combat Grab, with things like Dazing Blow. Dazing Blow is completely obscene. If somebody has low save fort, you can go grapple Dazing Blow. And even with the incapacitation, if the enemy normal fails and they're a boss, they're still stunned 1. And you still did normal strike damage. This is incredible. And if the enemy is not a boss and they have low fort, well, looks like they now don't get to play the game at all. And with Fighter Axie, we have Combat Grab to make sure we get the grabs. And then Oracle is here to give us utility and Whisper's weakness, plus Oracular Warning to, again, get first in initiatives. And then when we are going first in these initiatives, we are then completely winning with all of our fightery shenanigans. And it also is kind of a flavor win to have Oracle on Eruxi if you read the lore and how much they're tied into the stars and like reading from occult magics and the divine, all that kind of stuff. I think it is still a flavor win. I did try to make this build work without free Archetype. Yeah. And it just didn't work out very well, so I would not recommend it. I'm going to have it in the description still if you want to take a look at it. But it just competed so hard for trying to get the Oracle stuff online versus trying to get the grapple stuff. And then I need to go Ancient Elf to be able to cheat the feats again to the dedication. It was a whole thing. And would not recommend. It really... Going for the grapple fighter and trying to splash Oracle is not doable quickly without free Archetype. So, but if you do want to play like a fighter version of this, that you're still like slapping people, doing big damage, and then having the Oracle front-loaded power behind you, because that really is the goal of doing the fighter hybrids, that would be something like this, where you grab Elf, Ancient Elf for Oracle dedication, so they can get Sudden Charge and Intimidating Strike very early on. Sudden Charge is our main gap closer ability. Intimidating Strike lets us frighten enemies on hit, and this is going to be like our normal thing. It's going to be Intimidating Strike into Strike, And that's our normal, like, routine-ish. And then instead of finding other things that supplement this routine, like a slam down, or maybe getting something that, like, lets us attack swipe style or something along those lines, we then go for, like, Oracular Warning to help the entire party win initiative so that we are able to use fighter damage to then get us in a better spot quickly. And Whispers of Weakness to give us a +2 bonus to our next fighter strike activity, which is going to be an intimidating strike to get this frightened off more often. If you wanted to, this would be a build where you could get Vicious Swing working, because we are going to get this Whispers of Weakness, and you can do Whispers of Weakness and then use, like, hero points on the... But I think that's a little gimmicky, and fundamentally, you are still a polearm fighter. Most of the power budget of polearm fighter comes from you are able to lord reactive strikes over things, and now you're doing it while winning initiative more often. And that's good enough. So yeah, that is the Battle Oracle Guide. Hopefully this made sense. There was a lot of material to cover, so I tried to do it quickly, but in a way that was still comprehensible and producible for me. So, subscribe for more, because I'm back now. That's the video.